Welcome to the Dental 18 podcast. We're your hosts, Kiera Dent
and Dr. Mark Costas.
Mark and I had this crazy idea that maybe we could combine a dentist and a team member's perspective because let's face it, dentistry can be a challenging profession with those two perspectives. And Dental 18 podcast was created.
I'm a practicing dentist, a multiple practice owner, a dental performance coach, and the founder of the Dental Success Institute.
I've been a dental assistant, treatment coordinator, scheduler, biller, office manager, current practice owner, and international dental consultant. Mark and I don't just understand you, we are you.
Our goal is to positively impact the world of dentistry by sharing our lessons learned from the road in hundreds of dental offices.
Two perspectives, one mission, to help dental professionals reach their full potential. Welcome to the Dental 18 podcast. Hey, Dental 18 listeners, this is Kiera Dent coming today with another favorite person. You guys know you've heard her before, Dr. Summer Casmel. How are you today, Dr. Summer Casmel?
I am great. How are you, Kiera Dent?
So good. Where are you today?
I'm actually at my Eagle office. It is a beautiful, almost spring day here. So in the mountains of Colorado.
Ooh, rumor here has it that you guys are getting a snowstorm tomorrow, though. Is this true?
I don't know. I refuse to look because about this point in every single year since I've lived here, I'm always kind of over having this much snow. It's beautiful and I love it, but please don't tell me about another snowstorm. No, I don't even look.
Just live in denial and see what the day brings you each morning when you wake up, right?
That really is it. Yeah.
I like it. You're just laying it out there. Just let fate and life take you where it wants to go and smile as you go along. I like that a lot.
That's right. Well, what choice do we have, right? So.
Absolutely nothing. We can't complain about the weather. It's coming whether we like it or not. But things, This is a good segue. Things we do have some control over are team accountabilities and getting traction with our team meetings. And I know, Summer, you and I chatted before on the podcast of I really love the way you've got your team meetings broken down. And we're talking heavily on team meetings because on the podcast, we want to give team meeting ideas because I know as an office manager, that was one of my hardest things was coming up with topics to keep my team engaged, to keep them excited. So we're trying to do that with the Dental 18 podcast. But I felt like before we went into team meeting topics, we really needed to dive into what team meetings should even look like to give a basis before we give topics. So Mark and I had the podcast where we talk about WIGs, lead lags, how to set those, how to help your team set goals for the whole company so you're all focused and directed in the same direction. And then Summer, you and I chatted about having accountability check-ins with your team that are measurable, that are simple, that aren't too overwhelming, and you're really focused every single week on those weekly accountability check-ins. And now today, we're going to chat a little bit more about traction and kind of like for teams that are just starting out with meetings versus like the black belts. Because Summer, I know you've gone through the gamut of your career. I'm sure your first meetings with your team were nothing like what you currently have for team meetings. Would you agree?
No, and some days I actually question what the heck I'm still doing.
You guys, Summer is a really fantastic dentist and leader, but I also like to point out where we start from the beginning, some of you might be in that spot right now, and that's okay. Let's give you some tools and nuggets, regardless of what part of the journey you're on, so we can grow you into a better version of yourself as an office manager, as a dentist, as a treatment coordinator, dental assistant, hygienist, scheduler. I don't care what position you are in the practice. I really think this episode will enlighten and help you no matter what part of the journey you're on.
Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
Okay.
And it's all okay. It's all okay. No matter where you are. The cool thing is there's always somebody who's doing something that you can learn from. So I love as I check out other offices and people, like there's always people doing really cool stuff that you can kind of gather nuggets of information from. So
I love it. I love it so much. So let's start out. Let's talk about like we talked about with weekly meetings. Weekly meetings, the idea in 4 disciplines of execution is that every single week you should be meeting. You should have your 3 WIGs, the wildly important goals. You can call them goals. I don't care what you call them. But the reality is the three big target things that you want to do for your company, where you want to be. So that's like kind of the target board for everybody going. And then the weekly meetings are supposed to support. So every team member is accountable for something that's going to support to get the practice in the company where we want to be by the end of the year. So it's kind of like a general premise for it. But Summer, you and I were talking this morning about a different idea around this. So let's talk about kind of some ideas of where your practice was maybe a couple years ago. And then we'll kind of roll into where you are today so people can get different ideas based on whatever part of the journey they're in.
Okay. Well, when I began, it was really pretty much just me, a smaller team. We did have an associate doctor, but we started out with absolutely, more simplistic goals once a week because we worked the regular 4 days a week and things like that. And so, an example of some of those goals were, the hygienist, were honestly just trying to figure out ways to increase production. So sometimes those goals were discussing how am I going to implement fluoride for adults and how am I going to talk to them about fluoride varnish. And I'm going to track per day how many adults I talked to and how many said yes. At the end of the day, they kind of added those up quickly. And they would come at the end of the week and just say, hey, I talked to, oh golly, I don't know, 30 people and 20 said yes. And we'd all celebrate. Great job. And then they would decide, is that a goal that they feel is pretty well a habit at this point and they feel super comfortable, or do they maybe need to keep it another week to really ingrain in them the verbiage? Do they need to change anything, or did they even need to have a calibration session with one of the doctors, to discuss, hey, when you come in and kind of edify the need for varnish on those adults, I noticed that my percentage went up so much more. So sometimes in the beginning, it was just having those conversations, getting verbiage, and tracking things like adjunctive fluoride.
But I love this. I love this so much. And I'm going to jump in on this because I think so many offices think like, okay, every single week we need to set new lead and lag measures. We need to have new goals for each person because that's what the books say. That's what we're supposed to do. But like, what is the point behind these meetings? Is it to check the box to say, yep, done, move on. We need new goals. Or is the reality that they should be gaining habits so we don't have to revisit this in a couple of months again? Like if you were to have them track fluoride for 1 week and then move on to sealants the next week and then on to reappointment percentages the next week. And then like to me as a human being, that's a normal person. Like let's talk about goals in our personal lives. Like how many of us, Summer, I don't know about you, but for me, it takes me quite a few tries to like actually get a habit to be a routine and to be a habit for me as opposed to switching gears on myself every single week trying to get traction. I don't feel like you really gain traction. And did you notice that with your team at the beginning when you'd switch up goals so quickly? Or was the reverse? People weren't willing to get out of their comfort zone and wanted to keep staying in the same goal because they weren't willing to push themselves. What did you find?
Well, and actually that's such a good point because, on one hand, you want them to be accountable to that goal. That's the reason they're accountability meetings. So if they're coming consistently and needing to keep the goal for lack of trying, lack of creativity, lack of having conversations, that's something different than no, I'm truly trying and then I'm tweaking and then I'm trying and then I'm tweaking. So I do think there's kind of that line of figuring out where that person sits in it. And like I said, kind of the last time we spoke, my team has gotten pretty good about almost recognizing in themselves and their own team members when really they just need a little extra push. So I think that what we have found is it can go either way, but by and large, this team very much so will want to tweak it and come back next week and see if it's better. And I totally give accolades to my lead hygienist was the one. Now that we're kind of an office of, I don't know what we are, 15 or whatever, we now those providers work 3 longer days. And so, it was Amy who said to me, gosh, it's really hard to have a weekly goal because I only work 3 days. I have days off and 3 days just isn't enough for me to feel like I'm truly gaining traction. And so we decided, absolutely, let's keep them at least 2 weeks. And sometimes if you're really gaining good traction, if you need to keep it another week or 2, that's absolutely fine.
And so I think it's more like the principle of like, don't check the box because you're doing it. Like see the purpose behind it and make sure it's fulfilling the purpose instead of just checking the box.
Yes. And that, as we discussed before, that makes your team member feel better. Like I see, I can actually track whatever analytical software you like or just on a spreadsheet, whatever, but it's really neat to see 1 year ago, where some of these percentages were, and just because of their diligence, kind of where they're going. And, an example of, now one of my hygienists in my other office, she was just telling me after really working on it for a year, she said, my goal now is actually to change my new patient times from 90 minutes down to 80 minutes, and still maintain all the same standards that we have in our organization, which, still includes obviously, perio chartings, the same intraoral photos, any scans, anything like that. They still have to have, she still wants to have all that standard of care there, but she's just tracking now on a daily basis. Can she reduce her time down to 80 minutes, which is pretty amazing.
That's amazing, because that just shows, like, from the beginning of tracking fluoride, which is totally fine, to there are so many ways, like at the beginning where you said there's always someone doing it better than we are. We just need to push ourselves and we can always learn from other people. This is a hygienist who's been doing KPIs for quite a while, checking in on these accountability check-in meetings, and to look to see, I think this is also a testament to, if you're doing these weekly meetings consistently and you're having the intentionality behind them, look at how much traction and how far your team can progress, to where instead of it being, they do fluoride consistently. Correct, Summer? Fluoride is like just standard of care now. It's not even a question. That's just what you do. To where now the hygiene team can look to see, could we reduce and become more profitable without compromising care? Let's start tracking this to see. But if you're a brand new office doing meetings, I would not recommend you go to this road of tracking your new patient numbers. Let's get you dialed in on fluoride or other things. And then, but just so you can see the broad picture of like what these meetings are supposed to do and the outcomes they can create when they're done consistently and with intentionality.
Yes. Well, and, I will say another tweak that we've made is, I know a lot of times there's big wigs, as I think Mark alluded to, for the entire year. And I love that. I found that sometimes, that can stay consistent, and I think it's extremely important. But what I found was really successful just with my team, and this is just, I can't obviously speak for everybody, is I actually now have big wigs per month and for the departments. So it's been really fun. I have the dental assistants have kind of 2 little big wigs underneath. The hygienists have one. My marketing person has one. My billing department, all the departments, the hygiene and treatment coordinators have their own KPIs, and they get their own little prize at the end of the month if their department excelled. And so what's been neat is you get to see within the office kind of which departments are pulling together and really striving to hit those numbers. I still love, team bonuses and things like that, but sometimes some of those superstars can not be seen quite as easily too when they're put into the whole mix. So I really have enjoyed being able to see each department pulling together and achieving. It didn't take away from the team working together for us. It just definitely kind of gave them some fire to really work harder within their own departments.
Oh, I like that a lot. And Summer, I know you and I have chatted before, and you guys, Summer is brilliant. She's got a lot of ideas. She's, I think, of all the doctors I've worked with, she's one of the most intentional doctors, because she doesn't just put into place a system. She makes sure that system actually is receiving the results she put the system in place for. So I think, Summer, if you can rewind back to when you very first started practice ownership, what did kind of your KPIs in your meetings, like if you can rewind your mind all the way back there, dear. What did they look like then compared to what they look like now?
Golly.
And like, just give a couple examples, because I think, and then I'm going to chime in on the team side, because likewise, I think some of these goals, like had you come at me as a brand new person, I would have been like, what? You want me to track what? And like how you did that from the beginning, like what they kind of looked like at the beginning to where they are today.
Well, so much of that feels a little fuzzy. I also had 2 kids and things like that. So many of those years, I hardly
You just were trying to survive life, right? Like
I really was. For all of you women, mother, doctors, owners, oh, heavens to Betsy, it's something else those couple of years. But
but it does. There is light at the end of the tunnel. Summer Casmel's here to tell you.
There is, and if you need support, let me know. But yeah, what I'll say is in the beginning, a lot of times we would get together, we would have meetings, never consistent, almost more like when the temperature was getting too hot, then it was like, all right, now we'll kind of get together and hash things out with
so
no
a
agenda.
reactive approach instead of a proactive approach. I got it. A lot of offices do that.
So we waited till we had to sometimes. And then when we did, we came in with zero agenda, and it was kind of like a free for all, like bring some stuff that you think we need to talk about. Well, we never weeded out what were the most important things that were going to truly move the needle forward, because I had never defined it. And that's the problem that I sometimes see is the doctor is either allowing the team to drive, which there's a time and place for that. But if they don't know where they're going, you can have a super effective manager, climbing the ladder. But as the leader, you have to know what wall is that ladder going to even be on. And so I think it's so important a lot of times that we have really crystal clear goals and expectations set aside for our team members. And in the beginning, I was really just trying to make it through the day with no real clarity of what I wanted. And the hardest part is finding white space in your days to set aside time to kind of come up with what really matters to you, what really matters for your practice, because if you don't know it and have passion for it, your team won't either. And so I had to get really crystal clear on what I wanted those goals to be. And that's where yearly bigwigs can come into play. But then for us, breaking it down now into monthly chunks has made even more of a difference, I think. So back then, I think it was just reactive, not crystal clear goals and no agenda, and no real accountability per position or department. Whereas now people come in and the onboarding process, which is, we'll say that obviously for a different day of fun, but the onboarding process has gotten so much different as to they do walk in now knowing exactly what their position is responsible for, because it's so important that when a team member gets done with that day, they need to know, did they win or not?
I agree completely.
They need to know, like, otherwise it just feels like a job. And they need to know why it's important for them, and that's why per position, I only have 2 to 3 KPIs per position, period. I want, without a shadow of a doubt, my scheduling coordinator to know, what her job is. And at the end of the day, she feels 100% confident she did everything in her job she could. And honestly, to shout out, the most amazing scheduling coordinator we just got, her name's Dulcie. And I mean, like, she just kills it on getting people in for that hygiene schedule, because she knows how important it is. And she knows that's her main job. So it makes such a huge difference when people feel those crystal clear expectations.
Well, and as a team member, I like knowing that I'm winning. I like knowing that I'm hitting the goals you want me to hit, and I know how to move the needle forward. Otherwise, I'm just scattered and I'm working really hard, but I'm not moving in any direction. I'm just working hard for the sake of working hard. And so a couple of things that I would like to highlight is, I think as a doctor, as a business owner, myself included, I own practices, I own businesses, and I think as in a leadership, so doctors, anyone in a leadership position, I would say, I have it actually on my phone. It says, determine the type of life you want to live, and we'll interject, determine the type of company or the business or the practice that you want to have, and then say no to everything else. Because what that does, like you said, Summer, is you get crystal clear on what's happening. You get crystal clear on where you want your practice to go. And you simplify that to like 3 goals. It has to be simple. Otherwise, if there's 10, you can't remember without pulling out a piece of paper. And I feel like if you have to pull out a piece of paper of what your 3 goals are for the year, you have failed, because you need to know inside and out what your goals are for that year and where you're headed. Otherwise, you're going to say yes to a lot of things that will derail you and make your team very confused. So when I hear doctors that listen to podcasts and they're implementing like day in, day out, all these brilliant ideas, which we are offering on podcasts, like it's a relentless amount of information that comes at you, and it's great. But if your team's implementing all these things with no clear direction, and you as a doctor are trying to implement all these brilliant ideas, but they're going in a direction against where you are actually trying to take your team, or they're distracting your team from where it needs to go. As brilliant as that idea is, it's actually not a brilliant idea. And so I think if you can streamline, like you said, Summer, get crystal clear and then build KPIs that are real simple for each person so they know that they won or lost. Like you said, I love that. That makes it real simple. Did I win or did I lose? Did I hit my 3 things? And it can't be like 25 things because I'm never going to win. I probably won't get all 25 things of those done. I'll probably get 2 or 3 or 4 or 5, but the rest of the list is always undone and I'm always losing every single day. And the reality is, are those 25 things really making a difference on the scoreboard or are they just distracting? So, I love that, Summer. That was such a good thing you brought up. Thank you for that.
Well, of course, but here's what I will say too, is as you know, we kind of merged in another practice and I expanded. And what I did find is through all of it, and by the way, we also changed softwares in the
No big deal. No big deal.
But what was funny, and this is what I noticed, is we had such a rhythm before then. We all knew our stuff. We all knew what we were doing. People knew when they won. Well, once you kaboom and make all these changes all at once, you're exactly right. Everybody's just trying to get through the day. And we had 3 months where it was just like, oh my goodness, like just get through the day. And, as the dust is settling and we can get back to, hey, remember what your job is, remember what it looks like to win, remember what your goals are. It really just, I love to see them when they do win. And I love to see them celebrating each other and, them having that accountability piece and knowing what they're doing makes such a difference in their countenance here, and how they treat the patients even and things like that, because they are joyful because they know they're winning in their job.
Right.
So it is funny how you're exactly right that when there's too much being thrown at one time, it makes it so overwhelming and difficult for your team. And here I am this many years out, 17 years out, and I still, as I did this with my office, I saw it firsthand all over again.
It's okay. We all keep growing and evolving. It's okay. But I love that because when we talk about this, I also like though that your team had structure prior to this new thing coming in. So you guys had a little bit of an upheaval, but there was still structure. There's still the accountability. And I also love that by having accountability, nobody can hide in your practice. You don't have the super strong players. You don't have the super weak players. You're still going to have a mixed bag, but everyone's going to be operating at a higher level of accountability because that's just the expectation of your practice. So I'll break it down. If you're brand new to this, like Summer was at the very beginning, get your 3 clearly defined goals that you want to do, and then break those down into monthlies. I do mine in quarters. Summer does hers in monthly. I do believe that when it's a smaller time frame, people can actually sink their teeth into that. When it's a year, what happens in the month when we do monthly production goals, we tend to lollygag until week 3 and a half, and then we're all scrambling to try and hit a goal. But if you do it on the weekly, everybody can be more clear on the weekly and we can actually connect to it. So similar to your yearly goals of where you want to be at the end of the year, break that down into smaller chunks, whether it's quarter, whether it's monthly, whatever it is. That way your team can see, are we winning or losing based on where we want to go and how can we correct that? And then I love the idea, set 3 simple KPIs. It does not matter if you don't know what a KPI is or what to track. Just come up with 3 simple things. A scheduler. Schedule is full. There's no hygiene openings and all patients had insurance verification for the next 2 days out. That's their 3 KPIs. That's a real simple way for a scheduler. You can get way more advanced if you're on the advanced scale like Summer. They're scheduled to production. Each hygienist is scheduled to production every single day. What are some other ones for your schedulers that you have?
Yeah. So I have 2 scheduling coordinators and I make it extremely simple. And that's just the hygienist to goal. Over 80% of the time, the numbers of days of the goal is divided by the number of days worked. And the hygiene reactivation necessary to complete that. I don't stipulate because here's the thing is they know what the daily goals are. They know what the daily production is per hygienist. I don't care how they get there. I don't care if they email, text, smoke signal, write them by pen. I don't really care. I just want them to get those people to goal, all the hygienists, at least 80% of the time.
That's simple. That is so simple. Yep. You can literally walk out the door without pulling out a piece of paper and know exactly what your KPI is. Did I win or did I lose that day? And then everything that you put in these accountability meetings tied to those KPIs, tied to the bigger office goal. So every single person, and that's where you can either expand these if they need to go a week or 2 weeks long, like Summer was saying, or if a week was enough time for them to really get traction on it and you can move on. But at the end of the day, they should be hitting their own mini KPIs. And those KPIs should be growing the practice And it's okay. There are so many things, Summer. I'm sure you've put KPIs into place that were probably a bad idea and some that were a really good idea, right?
Yep.
We'll be dreaming up at night all these brilliant ideas of KPIs for people to track and to come up with it. And this is where you fine tune. Summer, I'm sure a few years back, you probably had a lot of KPIs per position. Is that true or false?
That is true. And I was even telling you on just a phone call we were having that the more I do it, the more simplified I'm trying to make things.
Amen.
Because I'm so with you that, I used to want to be super cool with my 1,000 spreadsheets. And actually, if you ask my team, they'll probably still say I have too many spreadsheets, but
that's okay. We've got to fill our time with something, right? Why not spreadsheets?
I do love spreadsheets, but they would say, gosh, yeah, I mean, they didn't quite always know what the big things were to get done in the day. And now, I mean, my feeling is like I said, my treatment coordinators, the insurance coordinator, as far as AR, they know specifically what we're looking for. One person's accountable for it, or one department is accountable for it. And like I said, the most fun has been watching some of those departments rise up and help each other out to get to the goal. So then when you give them the gift card or whatever, it's such a fun celebration, I think.
Oh, I love that. Now, my last question, and then we're going to wrap this one up, is what do you do? How do you get, and don't go into a long, this will just be a quick one because we're going to do another episode about this longer. But what do you do when team members aren't on board with this? They don't want to be tracked. They don't want to be tracked. They're not children. How do you get around that to get everybody on board with being accountable?
Yeah. And I would love to say that I hired so amazingly that never happened, but sometimes it does happen. Sometimes you don't know until you get somebody in that true accountability is not their jam. And I will say that we always try, the practice director and myself, to do it as discreetly as possible. We usually pull them aside and just really kind of get to the why behind not wanting to be a part of it. So we always try to first kind of sit with them, because a lot of times it wasn't explained well. And I had a hygienist. She's since moved to Georgia, but she did tell me, she was like, I really want to be a part of this. I don't think I quite understand exactly the expectations. Well, that was a fail on our part. For some reason, the department head didn't make it crystal clear, which means, honestly, all failure comes back to me. I didn't empower my department heads to really do a great job. And so sometimes it's just they don't understand the why or the expectation behind it. Once you can really explain it, pull them aside in a quiet place and make sure they know. I've been amazed as to once they get it, and then they excel. So always start with that first.
And as a team member, I appreciate that. Come to me, ask me, let me give you my feedback, as opposed to just canning me or letting me go or being frustrated that I'm not hitting what you're wanting. Let's talk about it. Let's have a discussion and move on. So that way, as a team member, we can excel. And as team members, please take this feedback super, super well. Understand that your team wants you there, and they're not doing accountability check-ins just because they want to measure you and make sure you're doing your job. We're making sure that we're actually having it actually achievable for you and your life's easier, and that we're growing the practice instead of letting it die because we're not watching our numbers and being responsible owners of the job that you're now working in as well.
Exactly. And that's, from the doctor's side, side of it, it's more or less that they really are trying to grow practice that's going to be good for you as well. A good work environment, better technology, things like that is always the hopes, right? And so without these things, they can't continue to progress forward. So I think I always start with that. Of really pulling them aside and making sure, because some people are introverts and they don't want to ask in front of big groups. And so pulling them aside and letting them have a conversation with the practice director, myself, whatever. And, it doesn't have to be uncomfortable. It really doesn't. I think just saying, hey, I'm doing a check-in to make sure that you understand why we're doing it. So let's have a discussion and tell me what your side of this is, or any concerns that you may be having, and then let them just talk. And I've been amazed. I've been amazed as to how many people really want to get on board. I'm guessing for a different conversation, what if they don't want to get on the bus?
Right. And we're going to save that for another time, because I'm sure all of you want to hear that. And Summer and I have some pretty good ideas for you that we'll save until next time. But I do like the idea of helping them get on board, helping them to see team members. Accountability check-ins are not to be checking in with you. They're to be making sure you're progressing, because progress, as according to Tony Robbins, when we're progressing, that's when happiness is there. So, and I firmly believe that as we progress and become better versions of ourselves, happiness is right there waiting for us. And that's the way we continue to maintain happiness throughout life. So that's another episode with Dr. Summer Caswell. Thank you as always, Summer, for joining me. I really appreciate your insights and the wealth of knowledge that you always are. So thank you.
Oh, thank you. It's always fun.
All right, Dental A Team listeners, this is another episode with Dr. Caswell and Kiera Dent, and we'll catch you next time. And that wraps it up for another episode of the Dental A Team podcast. Thank you so much for listening, and we'll talk to you next time.